Welcome to the IT Free Training video on Windows Server 2012 licensing. Windows Server 2012 is licensed under two main parts, the server license and client access licenses. In this video, I will look at server licenses. By the end of the video, you will know how many licenses you need according to how many CPUs your server has and how many virtual server instances you plan to run. When you purchase Windows Server 2012, you purchase the right to install Windows Server 2012. The license you obtain with Windows Server 2012 determines how many physical CPUs can be used with that install and also how many virtual machines can be installed at no extra cost. Shown here is the license limitations per edition of Windows Server 2012. To start with, you can see the Data Center Edition, like all the other editions, allows one physical install per server install, but an unlimited amount of virtual Windows Server 2012 instances to be run on that physical server. Virtual instances must be run on the same physical server. They can be run on a different physical server only if there are licenses on that server that allow this. With the one license, you can have a maximum of 2 CPUs in the physical CPU in the server. Data Center does support up to 64 CPUs, which if you have a server with more than 2 CPUs, you will need to purchase additional licenses. Later in this video, I will cover purchasing additional licenses to allow you to run additional CPUs and virtual servers. The 2 CPU license count only refers to the number of physical CPUs. There is no limit to how many cores each CPU has. The next edition, the Standard Edition, only differs from the Data Center in the number of virtual server instances it supports. The Standard Edition supports 2. I will cover how these work and how to add additional licenses later in the video. The next edition, the Essentials Edition, allows only one install, either a physical install or a virtual install. The Essentials Edition supports only 2 CPUs, so this means that you can only use 1 or 2 CPUs with the Essentials Edition, regardless of how many licenses you have. The last edition, the Foundation Edition, supports only a physical install. It does not support a virtual install. It also only supports 1 CPU. The Foundation Edition is more designed to provide basic features for a small office, so it does not require additional features. I will now look at adding additional CPU licenses and virtual server instance licenses, starting with CPU. Adding CPU licenses is quite easy. For Standard and Data Center, if you want to use more than 2 CPUs in the one physical server, you need to purchase another copy of Windows Server 2012. This new copy or license will effectively allow the server to use 2 more CPUs. The license also needs to be the same edition. You could not, for example, purchase Standard Edition licenses to run on Data Center. Remember that Foundation and Essentials Editions do not support more than 2 CPUs. So if you have a server that supports more than 2 CPUs, you should purchase the Standard or Data Center Edition. If you had a server that supported 6 CPUs, for example, this would mean that you would need to own 3 Windows Server 2012 licenses. This may seem an unusual type of license agreement, but when you start considering that computing is moving more towards cloud technology, it makes sense that licensing would start working based on what the server can do rather than how many servers there are. I will now look at how the licenses work for virtual server instances. When you purchase a Windows Server 2012 license, you effectively have the right to install Windows Server 2012 on a physical server. With the Standard Edition of Windows Server 2012, you are also allowed to install 2 virtual instances of Windows Server 2012. These 2 instances must run on that physical server. You cannot use a virtual license from one server on another server. This may sound like you can run 3 separate installs of Windows Server 2012 on the same server that you can do with what you like. However, this is not the case. Once all the virtual licenses are in use, the physical server can only be used for management of the virtual machines running on that server. In this example, if there are 2 running instances of Windows Server 2012 running on the physical server is only there to run the virtual server. You could not, for example, install additional roles on the server or use it as a file server if all the virtual licenses were in use. Since the physical server is only there to run the 2 virtual servers, Microsoft allows any virtualization solution to be used. You do not have to use Hyper-V, for example, to run the virtual instances. You could run another solution like VMware to run the virtual server instances. If you wish to run additional virtual instances on the same physical computer, you can purchase an additional Windows Server 2012 license. This will allow you to run 2 more virtual server instances. So this means you can run as many virtual server instances on that physical server that it can support and that you are prepared to purchase licenses for. In some cases, you may want to move virtual server instances between physical servers. For example, for performance reasons or to take the physical server down for maintenance. If you consider the following example, there are 3 physical servers. All physical servers have 2 licenses and thus can run 4 virtual instances. A decision is made to take the first server down for extended maintenance, and thus the virtual server instances must be moved to other servers. Since the second server has 2 licenses and only 2 virtual instances running, 2 of the virtual server instances can be moved to this server from the first server. No more virtual instances can be moved because there are not enough licenses available. In order to move the last 2 remaining virtual instances, a new license needs to be purchased, which, in this example, I will add to the third server. The additional license will allow the third server to run 2 additional virtual instances. This means that the last 2 virtual instances can be moved from the first server to the third server. Now, you may be thinking, since the virtual machines are just being moved while the server is down for maintenance, could the license just be moved as well? Microsoft only allows the license to be transferred from server to server after 90 days have expired. So if the license was moved to the third server rather than purchasing a new license, 90 days would need to expire before the license could be moved back to the first server. There are some exceptions to this. For example, if the server was to have a major hardware failure and would never be brought back up again. In the case of massive hardware failure like this, the license could be moved straight away. Well, that covers it for Windows Server 2012 licenses. I hope you found this video informative. For more free videos, please consider subscribing or visit our website. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.